May, may suggestion si Art, Art Reyes.
What?
Bago raw mag-start, dapat mag-group hug tayo.
Virtual.
Virtual group hug. Hey, Mr. Paulo. Good morning, sir.
Hello, good morning.
Morning, Paolo.
Hi, guys.
So it's 10:02. I suppose we can get started. We've got 110 people on board already, and it looks like there's a lot to discuss. So with your permission, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please, Mitch, go ahead. Thank you.
All right. So John, can we show the agenda, please? All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Happy Easter. And on behalf of the entire
Good
PU
morning.
family, welcome to today's forum.
Good morning.
Morning. As you can see, what we have on the screen is our agenda, and it's a pretty simple agenda. I start with giving you the purpose of this forum, and our chairman, Mr. Alan Santos, is going to give his opening remarks, and then we go straight into the meat of the discussion with comments and inputs from Mr. Banzon, Dr. Benedicto, Sandy Reyes, and I don't see Mr. Bob Inco's name here. But Mr. Bob Inco is joining us all the way from Florida in the US. So sorry, your name isn't here, but we'll put it. And then we're going to have an open forum. And during the open forum, if anybody feels strongly about any position, please feel free to share your ideas with us. So after the open forum, then we discuss what's next. So after this forum, what do we do next? So without further ado, let me start. The topic at hand is whether the time has come for us to unhinge ourselves from a tariff regime for three very important classes of business, namely fire, surety, and motor, and transform ourselves into a free market or to retain the tariff controls. For sure, there are compelling reasons to back up each position. And we are here today to listen to the champions elucidate on theirs. Prior to this forum, the PIRA Secretariat has forwarded the written papers of each of the champions, in addition to other materials on the topic, which we have likewise sent. This is to inform you of the important arguments for or against each side, with which you can be aided to come up with a firm position come our GMM later in the month. We are fortunate to have with us this morning Dr. June Benedicto, Mr. June Banzon, Mr. Sandy Reyes, and Mr. Bob Inco, acknowledged experts in the respective fields, to share their thoughts with us. I'm sorry to say that the other champions are not available this morning. Nevertheless, we have shared their positions with you through their respective papers. Time allowing, our champions here present have graciously agreed to clarify some points that you may have. Let us all remember that there is no right nor wrong position. We are here to decide on what system best fits us, given the circumstances that we commonly face and the realities on the ground. So I ask you to please keep an open mind, hear out the arguments for or against, and in the end, come up with your own position, bolstered by your own arguments, which we don't expect you to arrive at the end of this session, but to keep in mind and to weigh in the run-up to our GMM. So without further ado, allow me to call on the PIRA Chair, Mr. Alan Santos, for his remarks. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Mitch. Good morning, everyone. Happy Easter. And I hope that you and your loved ones are all keeping safe in this recent surge of the COVID-19 virus. I'd like to welcome you all to today's Industry Forum of PIRA. And sorry if some of my remarks are a repetition of what Mitch has already said. But anyway, tariffs or no tariffs, that is the question. As you may all know, our fire, motor, and utility lines are still subject to tariff or minimum premium regulations. And whether or not tariffs should be removed has been a perennial question, not just among PIRA members, but also from our stakeholders, such as the brokers and even the IC. The issue came to a head.
To look at the impact on the business operations.
The issue came to a head when the IC started to tighten the screws on tariff compliance, as they started to require non-life companies to submit their premium registers, thus exposing them to potentially huge penalties. In this forum, we will hear from a number of speakers the arguments for taking a particular rating environment over the other. You may expect that the arguments could vary from one line of business to another. The presentations will be followed by an open forum so that we can hear your reactions and perspectives. The objectives of this forum include the following. First, understand the pros and cons of a tariff regime versus a free market regime. Second, allow PIRA members to express their opinions and perspectives on the issue. And third, prepare PIRA members for a referendum during our next general membership meeting that will establish PIRA's position on whether or not to have tariffs for each of the fire, motor, and surety lines of business. PIRA's position will then be discussed with the IC to hopefully create and execute a plan that will move the industry toward the desired regulatory rating environment. And so without further ado, let me turn you over back to Mitch to get the ball rolling. I wish you all a highly engaged and fruitful discourse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So since we have a lot to discuss this morning, let's dive into the presentations. To begin with, can we call on Mr. June Banson for his presentation? June? Is Mr. June Banson with us? I saw his name earlier. June, are you here?
Oh, naka-online si June. Nakikita ko siya.
Naka-online si June.
Baka naka-mute si Sir.
Baka naka-mute siya. June,
Sir June ba?
naka-mute ka pare.
Sir June Banson, baka po naka-mute kayo.
O, naka-mute nga siya.
June Banson, mag-unmute ka.
Oo nga.
Tita Ming's with us pala. Good
Yun,
morning.
okay na.
You invited me, didn't you?
Yes, of course.
Hi, ma'am. Good morning po, ma'am.
Morning.
Morning, ma'am.
Morning.
Mr. June Banson, are you? There he is.
Good.
Welcome, Mr. June Banson. And
Okay.
the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, good day, everyone.
Good morning. Yes.
Well, first of all, I wish to thank the organizers of this forum for inviting me to share my 10 cents worth of comments about the issue at hand. I had the good fortune of working in companies that gave me the opportunity to learn a few lessons about underwriting, marketing, sales, and admin. It was an experience that triggered me to wonder whether insurance companies provided consumers their money's worth when buying insurance. Long story short, I realized that price and the scope of insurance protection, the quality of day-to-day service, and claim settlement were considered major factors in many a consumer's mind. But in good times and bad, price almost always occupied the top spot. And talking of price, it doesn't really take a rocket genius to know that in its very simplest form, cost and margin for profit make up the price. So the question is, who determines the cost and the margin of profit? Is it the entrepreneur or someone else? So let me share some thoughts about this matter. Everyone knows about this, but let me start with property insurance. We all know fire insurance covers building, machineries, equipment, and stocks. They are stationary and they are subject to inspection to determine their location, the probability of perils like flood, typhoon, and other natural occurrences. The inspection includes its occupancy, construction, housekeeping, firefighting equipment, and other attributes of the risk. Each property risk, especially for commercial and industrial risks, has its unique characteristics and attributes. Of course, residential risks or homeowners insurance are generally written without the need for ocular inspection because they are homogeneous in construction, occupancy, and generally of good loss record. Motor, on the other hand, is a moving risk. The brand, the year model, the other details about the vehicle is readily available to the insurer. And there are millions of vehicles running around for years. And it's no wonder enough data have been gathered by insurers that would show both the positive and negative attributes of each brand and model, like loss experience, safety features, gas consumption, availability of spare parts, cost of maintenance, longevity of service, the likelihood of breakdown, or even attraction to theft or carnap. In fact, the review of car experts help a lot in the underwriting of vehicles. Bond, on the other hand, is a completely different animal. Three parties are usually involved, the two contracting parties and the surety. And contracts are usually scrutinized by lawyers. Collateral is required, though the type of collateral and amount differ from one company to another. Of course, the track record of the parties plays a major part in granting of the bond. Now, for each type of these lines, or for each of these lines, a uniform premium rates are prescribed by tariff, no matter how different their physical characteristics are, regardless of the degree of exposure to natural perils and other hazards, regardless of how good or bad the underwriting results are for each unique class of risk. In addition, regardless of the disparity in each company's premiums written, premiums retained, acquisition cost, reinsurance cost, claims paid and outstanding, net worth, insurance companies are expected to stick to tariff. So there's your Uncle Bob, the three major lines that are tariff. But let me now go to the non-tariff lines, just for comparison. Marine cargo and marine hull, aviation, personal accident, health benefits, casualty lines like CGL, money securities and payroll, fidelity guarantee are but a few examples of product lines that are non-tariff. Let's take marine cargo and marine hull as examples. The cargo is hardly subject to ocular inspection. For the most part, application forms are filled up and insurers hope that the applicant has enough scruple to exercise utmost good faith in providing information. For marine hull, a condition and valuation survey report is usually required to accompany the application form. Now, keep in mind that cargoes and vessels are risks that constantly move from one point to another. They involve enormous amount of exposure, especially where both the vessel and cargo are insured with the same insurer, not to mention passenger and crew personal accidents. So when a tragic sea mishap, like sinking, occurs, the death and injury to the crew and passengers, the loss of damage to cargo and vessel, the potential oil pollution to the environment, the salvage charges, the general average loss, and contribution can involve hundreds of millions, if not billions of loss. And they can occur in rapid succession as well. Aviation is no different, except for airlines, which are usually done either on a fronting arrangement or with extensive reinsurance support and control from the global market. The Philippine market handles mostly general aviation, and similar to marine hull, the latest survey by a competent aviation surveyor is required, and complete details of the aircraft, whether fixed wing or rotary, flying hours of the aircraft, and the pilot are submitted. Thus, in all these non-tariff lines, when losses are piling up, insurance companies have the option to continue accepting this risk on a per client basis and at the premium rate, terms and conditions that they believe will convert the red figures to black. Conversely, if the results are stellar for a certain client, lower premium rate, broader cover, and other concessions are given to the client. This is absolutely the opposite in fire and motor, where similar catastrophic events like flood, typhoon, or earthquake can shake insurers to the core. And yet insurers are expected to still apply the tariff for the very same risks that knocked them broke. Other lines like personal accident, employee benefits, casualty products, such as comprehensive general liability, money securities and payroll, fidelity guarantee, are widely available and at different premium rates from one company to another. Erection all risk, and contractor all risk are also two engineering insurance coverage that are essentially non-tariff. So, for the love of me, I cannot understand that companies that invest their resources to secure the latest IT program, the latest underwriting and claims platforms or applications, hiring experts in analytics and modeling, and perhaps even a non-life actuary to price their products, they still end up operating under a tariff regime. The very same tariff that apply to companies with little or moderate investment in latest technology. One may argue that each company can submit its own tariff to the IC for approval and doesn't have to follow the PIRA tariff. But that is neither here nor there. It still locks the hands of the company to react as the need arises. What an insurance company needs to have is the leeway to run their data as quickly and as often as possible to give them a baseline for pricing each class of risk over a specific timeline. In other words, this is a risk-based pricing. These companies have their unique business models, different marketing and sales strategies, different technical expertise, different appetite, different investment strategies. If the cost is too high and there is very slim chance to make a profit, the insurer may either price itself out of the market or maybe slow down, or completely withdraw from insuring loss-producing risks. On the other hand, if the company is very efficient in controlling its costs and the probability of making a profit runs high, it will devise a way to increase its business at a very competitive price. I would be very, very sad if there are still companies that ride the flow of the river and conduct the business the same old way they did in the past decades. You know, manual or partially computerized method of gathering, processing, and analyzing data, gathering the usual figures for their monthly, quarterly, and annual reports, and probably for the renewal of their treaty program, and submitting their decajon business plan to shareholders. Conversely, companies that dare swim against this stream to be more efficient and competitive, invest in new technology to find better opportunities, will certainly change the course of their journey and be the master of their own destiny. As one African proverb says, smooth seas do not make skilled sailors. So in closing, what exactly am I saying? I believe we have to change the way things are done. And it's about time we recognize that insurers should determine its price, no one else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. June Banson, for sharing your thought-provoking position on the matter. I am sure that the audience is raring to ask some questions or clarifications, but to give ample time for the other speakers, may I request that we have a common Q&A at the end of the session. As I said in the chat box, please feel free to jot down your questions, lest you forget them. So, second in line, can I call on Dr. June Benedicto to share his thoughts with us? June?
Yes, thank you very much, Mitch. And good morning. Happy Easter to everyone. I hope you're all keeping safe. So, this is parang ano to, this is the continuity of what my good friend June Banson has said. No, so here, you know, as insurers, sometimes the basic question that we ask ourselves is, how do we price our risk when we sell insurance products? And of course, let me go back to the basic foundation of the pricing options that we have. For example, whether it's tariff or non-tariff, no, I think the foundation of pricing should not be should not be forgotten. In fact, now we should always remember that the pricing formula for insurance premiums, no, is of course the sum, no, of the allowance for losses, allowance for expenses, and allowance for profit. So before I can even say whether we should have a tariff or non-tariff, no, as previously mentioned by my good friend Tokayo Jun, no? Kasi what's happening is that whether you are technologically capable, or whether you are just so and so in technology, in a tariff market, you follow the same price. But I will not answer the question on whether tariff or non-tariff be used now for the particular lines that we are looking at. This is the tariff lines that we have: fire and motor and bonds. So let me go back to the basic foundation, the basic formula that each and every underwriter, the person authorized to do the pricing, no? Let us expound the meaning of these items. Like, for example, when we talk about allowance for losses, I would recommend that, you know, any line of insurance, whether tariff or non-tariff, no, must keep a record of losses. And such record must also be dissected, no, to reflect losses from each type of peril covered by such a product. You know, in the past, 20 years ago, when we were doing underwriting, no, we normally do this manually. But now, you know, with the technology that we have now, it's a lot easier now to dissect the information that we get from each and every policy that we issue. No? So technology can definitely help us in establishing now this record. A record no, reflecting losses from each type of peril covered by each type of insurance product. And on the absence of a detailed loss record, it would not be easy to establish the adequate amount for allowance for losses. Because of this, no, PIRA in the past has developed tariff for its members based on subjective perceptions of those who prepared the tariff way back then. Actually, hindi naman siya totally subjective because during that time, in the preparation of the tariff lines for fire, motor, etc., we were also trying to look at the price, how other markets were doing their pricing. So basically, hindi naman zero. No? When we started the tariff, no, meron siyang pinanggalingan na data which was from other markets. But and then underwriters at that time injected their own experiences to create our own tariff. And you know, this tariff later on, no, prepared by PIRA, of course, as this was distributed to all the members, and all the members of PIRA agreed to follow the terms of the tariff. In fact, in the early days, there was even what we call as Tariff Enforcement Board, where this is now a peer pressure, where when a company is found to be violating the tariff, the underwriter has to face the Tariff Enforcement Board composed of his own peers in the industry. And there he has to justify how he came up with a rate, no, based on the tariff, right? And of course, this tariff manual was also presented to the Insurance Commission for approval. And then, of course, with the approval of the Insurance Commission, then, of course, PIRA members and insurers writing this type of line like fire or motor or bond, no, they were, of course, expected by the regulation to follow those rates. And, of course, as we have seen recently, no, not following the tariff can cause you to pay fines. All right. So my basic message on this portion on losses is that with the technology that we have now, no, I would recommend that insurers have to start collecting their data based on every peril and on the losses caused by each and every peril that they are writing. And then, of course, the next one is the allowance for losses. No? When we talk about allowance for losses, these expenses include the following. Una, the general admin expenses. Second is the acquisition cost or commission. Third is yung reinsurance cost. So if you can see, these three items alone, no, if you look at it, are areas for differentiation between insurance companies. Because like, for example, as mentioned, for general admin expenses, there are companies who spend a lot of money, for example, on development of their, let's say, their IT systems, while some companies do not even spend so much. So, and of course, some companies, as we know, pay better benefits than others. So this could be the general expenses of each and every company is a source of differentiation in terms of pricing. And then, of course, the acquisition cost. Well, of course, we know that there in tariff lines like fire and motor and bonds, there is specific also requirement in terms of the commission to be paid. However, of course, we know that, of course, there are some other ways of paying back commissions or giving benefits to our agents, no? Like coming up with promos, trips, whatever. But the point here is that the cost, the acquisition cost, no, in general, is also a point of differentiation. And then, of course, third, the insurance costs. In writing business like for fire and allied perils, where you can also have a coverage for earthquake, typhoon, and flood, the reinsurance cost for catastrophic perils is again a source of differentiation. Now, this is, these areas, the general expense, the acquisition cost, the insurance cost, these are areas where insurance companies can differ with one another. So if we look at a tariff market, it would seem therefore that there's no logic. Whether you spend or not, you have to follow the same pricing. But of course, in a non-tariff market, this will be a basis, these items will be a basis for differentiation. Of course, it will be expected that the more people spend, no, for development, for IT development, for improvement of their marketing services, for improvement of their system of communication with customers, with one another. No? Of course, the cost there would be higher than if you are not spending on these items. So in the tariff market, it will be vital now, no, that in terms of pricing, it will be vital for every insurance company to be able to manage these areas of differentiation in terms of pricing. Of course, in a tariff market, there's no need to talk about these areas because anyway, whether you spend more or you spend less, you have to follow the same price. Now, of course, the third item that we're looking at in terms of pricing is the allowance for profit. Each company may have different profit goals. And as such, this is another area for price differentiation. And based on the above discussions that we have, the earlier discussions that we have, and considering the current situation in our industry, having a tariff for specific lines of insurance is still recommended in the absence of industry-wide data mining and adequate databases for losses. So, for example, if we look at fire, we look at motor, and we look at bonds. If you ask me the question, should we do a tariff or a non-tariff? I guess as mentioned earlier, no, it will be logical, no, at this point in time to look at ourselves and to look at our capability as an insurance company or as an insurance organization. Are we prepared to assist our members? No? In terms of when we go into a non-tariff regime, is PIRA prepared to assist its members in terms of providing its members data? For example, when we talk about a non-tariff market, as mentioned, the allowance for losses in terms of pricing is very, very important. While companies who have their own models of capturing data, no, can price based on their own experience. The problem is what you are collecting as data for your own company is data only applicable to your company. This is where PIRA can come in a non-tariff environment. PIRA should be able to provide a countrywide data on losses on a per peril basis and a per line of insurance basis. So I guess the basic question then is it all right to have tariff or non-tariff? My position is that, in the past, I've always been a non-tariff underwriter. So we do our pricing based on the experience that we have, and we develop a good feel in terms of the lines of insurance that we were writing in the casualty lines that I've been writing before. While in a tariff environment like fire, whether you're making money or not, you're charging the same premium. And I agree with my colleague, my good friend, my tokayo, June, no, that there is no differentiation in terms of tariff market. Whether you are suffering losses or you're making money, you're expected to charge the same price. So we can already see that there is no logic, no, in a tariff market like that. However, I would like to caution, no, that while I would prefer for a non-tariff environment, at this point in time, when we talk about allowance for losses, underwriters must not only be looking at their own allowance for losses as a company, but they should have access to data on a countrywide basis. And this is where PIRA should come in, to provide that nationwide data on losses that will be needed for proper pricing of losses for each and every insurance company writing business in our country. You know that while a non-tariff market will be beneficial to the insuring public, no, undisciplined and gut feel pricing may cause the collapse of some industry players, leaving their insureds exposed to claims being unpaid. Yun ang nakakatakot mo. While we can do the pricing that we want based on gut feel or based on partly gut feel, partly technology, at the end of the day, the question is, are we charging the correct price? Because what's happening now is we can see that while we have tariff, people continue to price lower and lower and lower. There's no more logic. So what I'm saying is that while I will encourage a non-tariff environment, no, at the current situation that we have, what I would like to say is that let us prepare ourselves for it. The question is, do we have the capability? If not, why don't we start building our capability now? Like for PIRA, what I am suggesting is, I think now you should start collecting data, no, towards creating that future environment in a non-tariff market where you can provide, no, the record for losses per line, per type of peril, etc., that can be used by our underwriters within the non-life insurance industry. Therefore, before again we decide on whether regulation should adopt tariff or non-tariff, our industry association must increase its capability of mining data for industry-wide losses per line and per peril to guide its members. And I would also suggest that it is also high time that the tariff rates of PIRA to be revisited to approach the current market pricing practices. So maybe what I'm suggesting is that not immediately a non-tariff market for fire or motor or bond, but partially, like for example, what we can do is instead of going straight to non-tariff, why don't we review the current rates that we have and adjust it according to the market practices that we are observing, all right? And of course, with the current technology that we have, and where insurance companies are now capitalized almost $1 billion, and I think the next year will be 1.3 billion. So you have a lot of assets that you can use, the sources that you can use to develop your IT, your your internal technology processes, no, in order to support good pricing practices. So good luck to everybody. I know that, of course, if you think about tariff or non-tariff, there are advantages and disadvantages at the moment. Because I know that if we at this point, if we adopt non-tariff practices, what will happen at the end of the day will be the strong, of course, will survive. But those who are not prepared, no, for such an environment, well, good luck. You may, the question is, you may or you may not survive. But at the end of the day, no, just a last piece of advice, let us not forget that technology is available. And I encourage our members in the industry to share the information, not to PIRA. If the members of PIRA will agree to share their own information on losses, on perils, and that those informations will be collected by PIRA and will be made available to all members, then I think we would have taken the first step towards a non-tariff environment. Thank you very much, everyone. Good morning and happy Easter again.
Thank you very much, Doc June. Your and Mr. June B's talk reminds us of the important components of pricing and the role that technology can bring into the picture. Now we're going to have a slight change in our agenda. I understand that Mr. Bob Inco, since it's already late in Florida, will speak ahead of Mr. Sandy Reyes. So, ladies and gentlemen, so far we have listened to seasoned underwriters who have at some point in their careers have likewise made decisions as marketing people and of course as top management. These people have worn several hats and thereby offers us a balanced perspective. This time around, and though like the other speakers before him needs no introduction, as he is an old industry friend, he wears a different hat. A hat as he is first and foremost an actuary specializing in non-life insurance and one of the handful in the Philippines. He is likewise instrumental in introducing risk-based capitalization into the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, all the way from Florida in the USA, is Mr. Bob Inco. Bob? Bob, the floor is yours.
I think Bob is muted, Mitch.
Oh, Bob. Can you unmute yourself, please?
I know that's always something that I forget. But anyway,
Hi,
good
Bob.
morning. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, clearly.
Oh, okay, good. There. Good morning, everybody, and happy Easter as well. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to participate in this forum. What I have done, as you guys know, I wrote a paper, but for the purposes of this forum, I have prepared a short slide as well to use in my presentation. So, Mr. Hilario, if I could just go to the first. So basically, this is what I want to cover in my slide presentation. First of all, I'd like to give you an insight on the basis for whatever observations or insights that I might give. And basically what the overall observation I have made with regards to the issue of tariff or no tariff. And there, I have given you a hint of what my conclusion is. I think tariffs should be abolished, and I think uh, insurance companies should be filing their own rates. And of course, I will discuss what the benefits are. Now, some of them will just be a repetition of what the two Junes have indicated already, and I guess that's what happens when you're speaking towards the middle part of the forum. And I will discuss if we allow individual insurance companies to file their own rates or to develop and charge their own rates, is that acceptable under the current insurance code that we have? I will also talk about what the possible rating environment might be, where companies are allowed to charge their own rates, and what the role of the insurance commission might be in an environment where companies filed and charge their own rates. So next slide, please. So as Mitch has indicated, I'm offering some conclusions and observations based obviously on being a qualified actuary and experienced non-life actuary for many, many years. As an actuary who, believe it or not, 20 years ago developed the fire tariff that's currently in use. But most importantly, I'm offering the perspective from and observations from the fact that I have operated in the U.S. Insurance industry for 50 years. And this is significant because as most of you probably know, in the US, insurance is state regulated. So every state has their own insurance commission and operate independently. And obviously, each state has their own insurance regulation and insurance regulation system. So there is an opportunity to observe the states that are doing well with their regulation and to identify the ones that are effectively managing the rate regulation. Go ahead, next slide, please. And there is the conclusion from the observation. I'm not aware of any state or any line of business in its state where tariffs are imposed. Every company files and charges their own rates. Now, it's not as if tariffs were never imposed, but I remember tariffs were imposed, I guess I would count 50 years ago already, is the last state that I remember has been imposing tariffs. So that gives you an idea of what they think of tariffs. They think that tariffs are anti-competitive. That's the reason why they're not imposing tariff, or no states are imposing tariffs. But of course, they don't necessarily follow free market in the sense that there's a level of involvement in by the insurance commission in the approval of rates that insurance companies charge. And one other observation, of course, is that the process of developing rates, there are significant involvement by actuaries of the company in coming up with the rates, and of course also involvement by actuaries of the insurance commission in the process. Go ahead. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of filing own tariffs, own rates? Well, some of these things obviously will be repetitious of, again, like what the two Junes have brought forth. But obviously, filing your own rates or developing your own rates will result in each company reflecting in their rates their own claim experience, their expense experience or provisions, as well as their profit requirements. Um, and and even this whole issue of profit requirements, it's not always 5% underwriting profit. Each company in the US can develop their own profit loading, depending, of course, on what their own requirements are, how adverse they are to the risk, and what return on capital they are pursuing. Of course, filing your own rates and developing your own rates also motivates, and again, this was mentioned also by the two Juns, it motivates risk and expense management, because any benefit you get from your efforts will be rewarded in terms of being able to charge lower rates and being more competitive with your price. It's also more fair to consumers. Why would consumers be charged the same rates when maybe there are some consumers that are have better significant claim experience? And rates could be a lot more responsive. There is no need, unlike during tariffs, to breach tariff, because if you're not happy with the current rates you're charging, well, then file new rates. And so rates will turn out to be more responsive in a regime where companies are able to file their own rates. And of course, it fosters competition. It improves the quality of the product, because each company's effort towards that will be rewarded, again, like I said, by having prices that are more competitive and the potential to gather more market share. And of course, it could also reduce the cost of regulation. Perhaps the Insurance Commission doesn't have to monitor rates as closely, because there will be, like I indicated earlier, there won't be any motivation for companies to breach their own rates, because all they have to do is file new rates. Okay. So next slide, please. But the question then is filing your own rates in the Philippines acceptable, or does it need a change in the insurance code? My observation is it does not. And I guess you guys can review the insurance code yourself as well. But in my estimation, insurance code Title 7 specifically deals with rating organization and rate making. Appears to say so, that you can, specifically section 361 of the insurance code. In fact, what is interesting is that reading the insurance code, I noticed it looks like it's a complete duplication of the rating regulation manual in the US. So if that rating regulation in the US allows companies to file their own rates and charge their own rates, then that should be applicable in the Philippines as well. Actually, the rating regulation in the Philippines through that insurance code indicates that rates cannot be exorbitant, inadequate, and unfairly discriminatory. And I think that covers the gamut. I think that is what companies that are trying to develop their own rates should be guided with. And why shouldn't companies, non-life insurance companies, not be allowed to charge their own rates? After all, life insurance companies do, and HMOs do. So again, another argument for why it should be acceptable to charge your own rates for lines of business that are under tariff. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the possible rating environment with companies filing their own rates? Well, I think that per insurance code, PIRA can apply for a license as a rating organization. I'm not sure whether that's in effect now or not, but obviously that's something that PIRA can apply for if it hasn't yet. If PIRA decides to be a rating organization, however, I think it should follow the same model that is followed by rating bureaus in the United States, specifically that they only develop what they call advisory rates. This is especially true for to be used by companies that are lacking credible data. They can use PIRA's loss costs and add their own expense and provision. In the US, I guess the term that they use is deviating from a rating bureau rates. Deviating because perhaps, although you believe the loss experience to be comparable, you have a different expense provision or expense requirement in your rates, and you also have a different or prefer a different profit provision in your rates as well. A possible approach as well is for companies to band together, especially where there's common ownership among companies, and then develop rates for the group. Another approach, of course, the obvious one would be, especially for large companies that have enough claim experience, large data to develop their own rates based on their own loss experience, expense provision, and profit provision. Next slide, please. Well, what about the role of the insurance commission when its company is allowed to develop their own rates? Well, of course, they can review and approve filed rates, okay, which is also true in the US. The level of process that's necessary to get the rate of approved is different from state to state, but definitely there's a level of approval that's necessary for file rates to be implemented. There's one extreme is where before a rate could be used, it should be priorly approved. The other the other extreme is where rates can be filed, but and then immediately used without waiting for the insurance commission to approve it. With the proviso, however, that the insurance commission at some point in reviewing the rates might require the company to stop charging those rates and basically disapprove it. The insurance commission also, just like in the US, could require the actuarial certification of rates charged by individual companies. I know that at this moment we have an actuarial certification of reserves, but I think the actuarial certification of rates is even more critical or more important, because actual certification of rates is more forward-looking. The actual certification of reserves is backward-looking. After all, what's the use of having adequate reserves when your surplus has diminished significantly because you've charged inadequate rates? Inadequate rates is what's going to kill the companies more than, I believe, inadequate reserves. This is the next thing that I have here is, I think, extremely important as well. And June alluded to this in his presentation. As you probably know, the basis for any actual study is the law of large numbers. In other words, an actuary can be more confident about its projection of losses if he is working out with a big database. And a big database obviously will be available only if every company submits their data. Not only submits the entire data, but in the detail that's most useful to the actuary. Now, I know that PIRA at times goes for requests this kind of information, but you know, in the U.S., it's actually the Insurance Commission that takes the lead in requiring annual statistical claim data from companies, with the proviso that you could lose your license if you don't submit the data that is being required by the insurance company, by the Insurance Commission. So it's really compelling, and there is no choice for most companies in the U.S. but submit the data that's required by the Insurance Commission. And of course, one other role that the Insurance Commission can take is to evaluate whether there's a competitive environment in the market. After all, filing your own rates and developing your own rates is predicated also on the assumption that there is competition in the market, and so that assumption needs to be validated regularly by the Insurance Commission. So that's, I believe, all I have with regards to my thoughts. Slide, please. Next, just to make sure. So I will be available for questions when the appropriate time comes.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thanks for your valuable input, especially coming from a perspective of an actuary and a clear actual solution going forward. Now, let's hear now from someone the previous generation, the likes of all our previous speakers, have mentored. So this generation is likewise due for retirement pretty soon. Another issue that the industry has to resolve to attract new young talent to ensure the industry's sustainability. Anyway, back to topic. This next speaker has the added perspective of the reinsurance market. So friends, allow me to call on our next speaker, Mr. Sandy Reyes. Sandy?
Yes, good morning. Okay, these are just token slides. I was asked to fill in for Jose, who I think is sick. So yeah, I was asked to speak on the pro-tariff side. Okay, so why are we having this discussion? First of all, I noted that in some of the materials, there was a material about the CAT facility. I think the CAT discussion is a separate issue altogether. So I shall just focus basically on the discussions relating to tariff. So why are we having this discussion? What is it that we want to achieve? Apparently, at both ends of the regulatory spectrum, you have a strictly tariff environment. And on the other hand, you have a total open rating environment, a free-for-all, where each company can just write risks at whatever rate they choose without regulatory controls. So is that what we want? And why? Do we think that that would be good for the industry? Would any company benefit from a totally tariff-free environment? What is our peg? Peg, yan yung ano ngayon term ngayon ng mga bata eh. Peg is what's your model? So what market rules are we aspiring for? This is important for us to understand how those markets got there and what perils we should avoid. What do we hope to gain from getting rid of the tariff now? What are the objectives? earlier, before this, Pira sent out some materials, and Bob Inco did mention there, have some comments that in the US, the primary purpose of tariff is to protect customers from excessive rates. Yes, it's to protect customers from excessive rates. In the Philippines, the purpose is to protect the industry by ensuring that premium rates are adequate. No? And then he also cited the prevalent violation of tariff and an apparent willingness of companies to absorb penalties as a sign that tariffs do not work in the Philippines. But I don't think that last statement is entirely accurate, because companies are not really willing or prepared to absorb penalties. The truth is companies violate the tariff because they feel they can get away with it. Actually, a lot of companies would have serious concerns if they are penalized for all their tariff violations. So what's the real reason for getting rid of the tariff? Can you please, okay. So what's the real reason for getting rid of the tariff? Is it really just to avoid penalties? Among the benefits of the tarification is supposedly to benefit the public because premiums shall be more competitive. So is that objective? To increase competition? Is there insufficient competition? Is competition only by way of price? Is this going to be beneficial to the industry? So I think it's necessary to look at the experiences of other markets. Next slide. John, 2 slides. Yes, okay, here, so you have tariff where it is prescribed. No, actually, the impression that tariff doesn't allow any flexibility for losses or for the characteristics of the risk, I think that's in reference to the current tariff. The former tariff wasn't as single rated as the current tariff. No? Basically what happened is companies were asked to submit their own rates, and they just submitted the lowest rates they thought possible. No? So flex rating is you basically have guide rates, and then you're allowed a certain leeway, from the guide rates. Prior approval is similar to life, where companies, there is no tariff, but companies have to justify their rates. And file and use, that is when you basically file it. If the IC doesn't disapprove it or doesn't respond, then you can use it. And then open rating is totally, you take care of your own rates. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so in the article by Commissioner Funa, he mentioned that in India, profitability and growth of property insurance deteriorated after detarification, as insurers offered deep discounts to capture business. Premium contraction actually led to negative premium growth in the first year of detarification as a result of reduced premium rates. Post-detarification, the insurance industry had been suffering from underwriting losses year on year, which led to an over-reliance on investment income. That's probably fine when interest rates and investment yields are high, but it's disastrous when investment yields decline. The Commissioner also cited the experience in China, where detarification resulted to severe competition with rates falling to half the tariff rate. This sharp drop led to solvency concerns, and this is why they reintroduced a tariff after 3 years of detarification. So I don't think there's any question that the same would happen locally. I often hear that RBC would prevent underpricing, but RBC and IFRS do not really make companies more profitable or address the problem of rate insufficiency. They do not give more information about insufficient rates. They just make the impact of writing unprofitable accounts on a company's, the impact of writing unprofitable accounts on a company's capital more apparent, and they make the presentation of financial results more transparent. But what can be more apparent than the current insufficiency of catastrophe insurance rates? And yet, in spite of companies knowing that the current rates are insufficient, they can't get away with it. They have to quote us at market. Clearly, just knowing the rates are insufficient does not prevent rates from dropping below what is sustainable. It has not happened in other countries, and it will not happen here, at least without the necessary preparation and structures. So some argue, so next slide. Some may argue that it is each company's lookout to ensure that they charge the correct rates. Let companies that charge insufficient rates suffer the consequences of their actions. But this is clearly not the case, because the truth is, some companies charging insufficient rates affects market rates, and therefore affects all companies. So even if companies know that rates are insufficient, they find that they cannot fight the market. The strange thing is that almost all companies say that they breach because they have to, only because other companies breach. Companies don't breach because they feel the rate should be lower. They breach to maintain market share. They breach to survive. So why is this so? Why do companies write below sustainable rates? No? As Dr. Benedicto commented, no? Without a detailed loss record, or perhaps you should say a sufficient population of risks, it would not be easy to establish the adequate amount for allowance for losses. The challenge with insurance is, well, as Jose mentioned in his write-up, is that insurance is just a promise. No? The challenge with non-life insurance is, unlike other products where the cost of production is incurred upfront, due to the uncertainty of insurance risk, there is often the attraction of hoping to get lucky. Unfortunately, these aggressive marketing practices, pricing practices, and that includes increasing commission rates, do affect market rates and prejudice all companies. So there clearly is a need for change. The current environment where we have a quasi-tariff does not work. What do I mean quasi-tariff? You have a tariff, but companies do not follow it. For tariff to work, it should be based on a proper determination of the risk cost. Can't just come out of thin air. No, there has to be a proper study. It's not easy for non-life insurance where you have a very wide range of products and risk characteristics. So to arrive at a reliable tariff, there has to be collaboration to build an industry-level database in order to come up with risk-appropriate tariff structure and pricing. That would now inspire the confidence of the members. As Bob reminded, insurance is about the law of large numbers. So it's necessary that a large pool of claim experience, a large population of risks be available, be gathered. And it's important that this information, industry level information, be disseminated to the industry. Yes, it has to be industry-wide because as stated earlier, the reality is insufficient or inaccurate pricing can prejudice all companies. It creates a cycle of destructive competition. So moving forward, yes, next slide. Okay. So we need actuarially supported, risk appropriate and relevant rates. We need consistent, credible, and effective enforcement. And in the future, we need regulation that allows more creative flexibility, product development founded on sustainable pricing. Because there has to be a move towards more risk appropriate and relevant tariff but with some measure of flexibility that allows for discounts and surcharges for fair pricing. But just as important as restructuring the tariff is the need for the industry to be confident that companies would abide by the tariff. Ang sabi nga, bakit ang Pilipino pag nasa ibang bansa marunong sumunod sa batas? Kasi takot mahuli. Having an effective tariff environment requires consistent, credible, and effective enforcement. But I do agree that having a purely tariff environment may inhibit flexibility. And by flexibility, I mean both sides. No? The need to adjust rates upwards due to significant adjustments in reinsurance costs, no? Or material changes in the risks, like for instance, in motor, no? The introduction of electric cars, self-driven cars, no? As well as flexible product choices such as and fairer pricing such as maybe pay-per-use, no? Driver profile-based pricing. So those are all good aspirations. But we should plot the way towards a future regulation that would allow more creative and flexible product development. But let us first build the foundation for an environment that would encourage sustainable pricing. And that begins by collaborating as an industry towards building a credible pricing reference and tariff structure. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Finish.
Thank you very much, Sandy. So we've come to the part of our proceedings where we shall be entertaining questions. Now, to help with an orderly Q&A, kindly post your questions in the chat box so that we can address them on a first come, first served basis. Now, if you would like to share your thoughts or positions, please indicate this in the chat box so that time permitting, we may call on you to speak. You are, however, also invited to share your thoughts and ideas through a position papers, which you can submit to PIRA so that we can share it with all. So I shall now go over to the chat box. There are some questions already there. Bear with me. First question is from Mr. Werner Parel of MAA. Werner asks, is risk-based pricing an idea whose time has come? 15 years ago, the Philippine insurance industry adopted risk-based capital, IC circulars 06-2006 and 10-2006. If the industry has accepted an RBC regime, the same reasons may therefore be propounded to justify an individualized pricing to all lines of business, as opposed to mutualization by homogeneity. Any of our speakers are free to answer.
Actually, mates, good morning.
Yes,
happy Easter to everyone. I was just answering your question where in your introduction you said, is this an idea whose time has come? So my answer is, it is an idea whose time has come because 15 years ago, the insurance industry has adopted already the risk-based capital. So why don't we go to the other side, the customer's perspective, where risk-based pricing may be discussed? And I appreciate this conversation, this dialogue among the industry players, because now we are openly talking about it, which means that we are not close to the imposed tariff already. Remember, there are only 3 lines that have remained written as tariff. So I guess, again, to answer your question, this is a time, this is an idea whose time has already well past, because 15 years ago, we already adopted the RBC. So that's my
Thank-
first comment. Yep.
Thanks for your thoughts, Werner.
Yep.
I'm
Thank
sure
you.
that's going to be very helpful. There's another question from Joel Belardo. The annual filing of rates should not be limited to FL, but to include EQ, Typhoon, and other Aeon acts of nature perils as well. It's not a question; it's a comment. So, okay, thank you, Joel.
First to the
Sandy, did you want to say something?
yes. Actually, pricing is really risk-based, no? As it's not whose time has come. It should always have been risk-based. No, that's as June mentioned. No, those are the components of your pricing. It's the expenses, it's the losses. It should really be included in your pricing. But the truth is, no, it's not easy. It's not like you can just come up with an accurate determination of the appropriate price if you don't have a large number of risks. No, that's the reality. No, and as I mentioned earlier, the reason why it's necessary for the industry to have a common reference, no, is because at this time, no, the way the market has reacted, no, the way the market dynamics moves, no, is if a company brings down the rates, it brings down everybody's rates, no, so everybody pays for it, no. But with regard to it's being more risk, the tariff being a hindrance to being more, what do you call this, risk appropriate. Actually, if you remember, Mitch, during the old tariff, no, when you inspect a risk, that is actually the time to also counsel the insured on how to bring down their rates by introducing risk mitigation or risk control measures, no? But with how things have evolved, where now you just basically have one flat rate. You just look at charging the lowest rate, no? Then that is gone. So it's not a fault of the concept of a tariff, no? It's the fault of how we have implemented.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. I guess what Werner was saying is that with the risk-based capitalization in place as a safety net, maybe that since we already have RBC, then that's one argument in favor of de-tariffication.
Yeah. Well, RBC is not necessarily. It just allows you to do what you want to do as long as you have the capital to pay for it. Doesn't mean it will avoid. It will prevent you from falling off the cliff.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. Oh, there's a question from Shankar.
May I?
Oh, Werner, go ahead.
Yeah. Just a short comment on Sandy's point, because what we're saying when we say risk-based pricing is that, well, of course, when you say that you inspect a property, you take a look at the COPE, and then maybe advise your client that he needs to do this, and that. But you're limited to doing that. The question basically is from the customer's perspective. If I improve my risk, am I entitled to an improved rate? A tariff scenario, a tariff regime does not allow an insurance company to do that. That's why we're saying risk-based pricing. So meaning it is individualized. You take a look at your customer, you price based on his risk. In fact, pricing the risk adequately signals actually an improved risk management perspective for the customer, because he'll just be saying, I don't need to do anything anyway. I will just be charged the same as the bad insured. So what incentivizes him? Nothing. That's
Correct,
why.
correct.
Thanks, Werner. Me
Yes.
naman, my 2 cents worth is, I think the tariff is like training wheels. You know, it allows you some leeway in pricing up to a certain point. Yung mga discounts, etc. But that's for an immature market. Now, question is our market in the Philippines already mature to get those training wheels out of the way? That's not, no, that's just a question. So there's another question here from Shankar. PIRA has to safeguard the entire industry, but how it can do if some companies with bigger financial muscles just nosedive the rates for a brief tenure to out other operators from the market. This is found happening in real world. Discount by bigger companies of 99% was found rampant in India after de-tariffication. De-tariff attempts should be carefully evaluated as Philippines has big and small players, but most are mid-sized and may find it real difficult to sustain an open onslaught by the giants. Well, it's more of a comment. It's more of a cautionary tale from Shankar. Now, there's a lot of other new messages coming in. There's one from, okay, wait. Let's get some from the members. Hold on, please. There's one from Ellie Luwalhati. My questions, comments on fire. This will be de-tariffed. How can we prevent what is currently happening in Indonesia, wherein everybody is adhering to cap pricing, but fire pricing has deteriorated? On motor, if this will be de-tariffed, the main issue is currently there is no sharing of loss information among insurers. For example, if an insured's renewal motor policy premium is increased by its current insurer due to an adverse loss history, the assured will just transfer to another insurer who will charge tariff rates and sometimes will not ask for
Loss history.
past losses.
Yes.
Okay, anybody wants to answer that or comment?
Yeah, that's actually, it has nothing to do with tariff per se, because you can incorporate that in the tariff.
Okay. Now there's another question, a good question actually, because it highlights a problem. A question from May Mascardo Abuy. While the current regime is on tariff basis, why is PIRA not providing the whole market loss experience? Does anybody want to answer that? Or do I answer it? Well, PIRA can only provide the data if we get it from the members. And currently, our members are not that willing to give detailed information to PIRA. If only it could, then a lot of these problems would be solved. But maybe since you highlighted it, then it brings it to the surface. That's something that we really have to get our hands together as an industry. Trust your association to come up with the right solutions by giving us the right information. You know, there was always a worry on that information landing in the wrong hands, it being competitive and all. But if you trust your industry association, then that shouldn't be an issue. But it's up to the industry, as we all say. There's another question here from Glenn Warren.
Rich.
Yeah. Somebody wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, this is Babinko. What is wrong with the idea that I brought up that's being done in the US, where it's the insurance commission that requires the submission of data subject to loss of license if the company fails to do so?
We're actually doing that right now, Bob. As a matter of fact, we're negotiating with the Insurance Commission to come up with a moratorium on penalties, or at least a cap on penalties, so that we can give the correct information. What's preventing the industry from doing that is our fear of being penalized to death at this point in time. So maybe going forward, prospectively, if the Insurance Commission heeds our plea and puts a moratorium on tariff, or at least a cap on it, then we'll give them the information and, we start anew. But then at this point in time, the penalties is like a sword hanging over our heads, and it's preventing us or paralyzing the industry from doing anything to solve the issue. That's the reality, the sad reality of our situation here.
I guess I'm not clear on why submitting claim information would.
Claims is just part of it. They're asking for very granular information. Almost our whole, everything, our books. See, so they're not just asking for claims.
Yeah, but I think what is necessary is the claims information.
Yeah, if they're only asking for that, then that's not an issue.
Because that's what's necessary to come out with a set of information that would give confidence on the pricing.
You're right. Maybe you can help us, Bob. Tell your colleagues in the ASP that's all you need for now.
Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
thanks. Let's go on to there's a question for you, Bob, from Amy Mania, Amy Mania. Questions for Bob Inco. Hi, Sir Bob. Could you please share more observations in the US? Were there limitations on the level of sophistication on the rate-making approach? Number 2, how did the small industry players adjust? Were there M&As because of de-tariffication? And number 3, do you think adverse selection will be of less concern in a free market?
Wow, isa lang.
Isa. Were there limitations on the level of sophistication of the rate-making approach? First question.
The level, give an instance of a level of sophistication is low in the rate-making approach. Is that what you're saying?
Air, would you like to come on board, please?
Hi, Sir Bob. Ayer here.
Hi, Air. How are you?
Nice to hear from you again. I'm referring to the number of say variables or fields that were used in the rate making in the US. Were there limitations that were imposed by the Insurance Commission?
Well, one of the criteria for making a rate reasonable is that it's not unfairly discriminatory. So basically, what the Insurance Commission is looking for is as many variables as necessary to be considered in the development of the rates. So, for example, for motor car insurance, not only is the make and model of the car relevant, but it's also the age of the driver, whether the driver uses the car for going to work, a lot of other variables that could differentiate one risk from another. Now, the more features considered, the better. There is no such thing as a minimum. As much as you can put together, I guess, the better. Do I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And your second question is what about?
How did the small industry players adjust, and were there mergers and acquisitions because of the tariffication?
obviously, if you're a small company, your database is limited. You don't have as much information to consider your information, what we call credible. So what you have to do is you have to supplement that information with industry information, and that's where rating bureaus come in that collect information for the entire industry on behalf of the insurance commission. And small companies then come up with a weighted average of their own experience and the experience of the entire industry in developing their rates. Obviously, there's some mergers and acquisitions as well that small insurance companies are subjected to for the purposes of being part of a bigger entity and for cost reduction purposes as well. And what was your third question?
Do you think adverse selection will be of less concern if we have a free market?
If you have a what market?
A free market.
I didn't catch it. What market?
A free market
A free
without
market?
tariff.
A free market. I don't think so. I thought it might even prevent adverse selection because being a free market, then you could be subject to the same free unfettered approach from insurance companies. So I don't see that as a cause of potential adverse selection.
Okay, thanks, Sir Bob.
Sure, you're welcome.
There's another question, and it's anybody from the speakers panel can answer. This is from Glenn Warren Avea. Staying in the tariff environment is good to avoid companies collapsing due to inadequate rates. But is PIRA ready to police its ranks? Are PIRA members ready to, for instance, share in the penalties if a member violates tariff? That will perhaps get the organization to a more diligent policing of ranks. Well, maybe we can open this not only to the speakers, but anybody from PIRA. Anybody willing to answer that? Okay, perhaps I can give my 2 cents. PIRA is willing to do the policing. Actually, in the past, we were very effective. And this is, in the 70s, 80s, where the PIRA had a rating, what do you call this? Rating bureau or something to that effect.
Yes. Tariff Enforcement Board, Mitch.
Thank you. Coming from the seniors, we had a Tariff Enforcement Board, and as a matter of fact, mas takot yung industriya doon sa Tariff Enforcement Board kesa sa IC. The Tariff Enforcement Board really asked the underwriters of each company to defend the rates that they were able to, that they gave. And there was a sanction at that time. But at the time where the IC allowed each company to come up with its own rates loosely based on the tariff, that's when we lost the teeth. So if they give PIRA back the teeth, then we're willing to do it. If we did it in the past, then we can do it again. But then again, that's for the industry to decide going forward. We were just reacting to Mr. Glenn Warren Avea's comments. There's another question from Becky De La Cruz. Is there any or are there any feedbacks from the IC on de-tariffication other than what was mentioned regarding the experience of other jurisdictions? I suppose she was referring to the article written by the insurance commissioner. But would anybody want to answer this, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mitch, yeah, I'll try to address the question. Actually, as I mentioned, the IC has been tightening the screws on tariff compliance, and we know all this. No? They're asking us to submit not just the claims experience, but also including the premium registers. So Bob, they're asking for it just so that they also have data on the exposures, not just on the claims. However, as a consequence of that, the breaches will now be visible to the IC, and what we're saying is, okay, we admit that there are breaches in the industry, in fact, uncontrolled, and we know that it's rampant. However, please understand that I think one of the reasons why the industry or the member companies of PIRA are breaching the tariffs is because the tariffs themselves are not yet updated, and probably there is no really an extensive study of where to set the tariffs yet, and hence the request of the industry to allow PIRA to work with, say, the IC and even the ASP or consultants such as Bob to update the tariffs, and that's when IC can start to, be more strict or stricter in imposing the penalty. Now, with respect to the tarification, the IC is actually asking us, no, what is the position of PIRA or the industry with respect to having tariffs or no tariffs, and that's why we're having this discussion, this forum, and eventually we'll vote on it. No? For each line of business, what do we think is best for the industry? And then we'll propose it to the, whatever we decide, we'll propose it to the IC and come up with a plan, no? On how to execute, whether it's tariff or no tariff. We have to come up with a proposal, a plan to the IC on how to move toward that proposed rating environment. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are all the questions in the chat box. Are there any questions from the floor?
Maybe, Mitch, from me. No?
Yes, please.
As Bob said, no, in his presentation, it appears, and I think it's also my interpretation of the insurance code, that companies now actually have the ability to file their own rates. I'd say particularly in motor, where they have probably accumulated a lot of loss data, because in motor, the claims tend to be relatively small but frequent. So I'd say a company, particularly the medium to large ones, have probably accumulated credible data in the motor line of business. However, I don't think companies have filed their own rates. Correct me if I'm wrong, no, but that's my impression. And if that is so, I guess my question to the companies, why aren't you filing your own rates now? If you want to have a different set of rates from the current tariffs, why aren't you submitting your own rates to the IC, so that you can price or rate based on your own experience?
And if I could just add something to that, Alan, and avoid being guilty of breaches.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's nearly noon. We have 15 minutes to 12. So If there are any other questions that you'd like to raise at this point in time, again, we're still inviting you guys to, if you feel like sharing your position papers with the industry, do send it to us and we'll make sure it gets to our members. Hopefully, what we did today and the materials that were earlier sent to you could help you arrive at an informed choice.
Mitch,
Yes.
can I present my own comments?
Please, please. That's a good perspective coming from a former regulator.
Well,
Go ahead, attorney.
I studied the development of tariffication in other countries and the different laws. So the trend right now is towards liberalization of the tariff. Now, in Malaysia, for example, they liberalize the tariff on motor car as well as on the fire in 2016, but covering only new products, meaning products whose features are material on motor car as well as on fire. Now, in 2017, they also liberalized the tariff on comprehensive fire. And in 2019, they are supposed to evaluate the effect of that liberalization for further liberalization. Now, in Singapore, I cannot find any law or any circular regarding tariff. So my analysis is that they're using the no tariff regime in Singapore. Now, in the US right now, I think the trend right now is more on the liberalization of the tariff in different states. Before, they are using the prior approval regime, but many states are already doing the different regime on rates. No, as discussed by Sandy, there's a continuum from prior approval, flexi rating, file unused, and then there's no rating. So in fact, I think one state does not have any rating at all. I think the study of in the US when they applied the liberalization of the tariff and to do away with the approval, the prior approval of premium rates, is that it resulted in the two advantages. There are more companies doing insurance on that line, and more product is available. The second one is that the company is able to price properly the particular product. And in fact, I think that's the trend right now in the US. They do away as much as possible. They try to open up some insurance lines. Now, in Kentucky, for example, they try to classify that into competitive business, and the other one is the non-competitive business. So there is what you call greater liberalization on non-competitive business. So I think it was also discussed by Bob regarding the role of the regulator to say what products are non-competitive, wherein there will be more liberalization on that, no? And in some of this, I think the reason of the liberalization they have identified, number one is that the primary objective of the regulator is to support the financial capacity, is to maintain the providers that they are financially sound and the market is sufficient, so that there will be an efficient flow of services, as well as for the possible lowest possible price for the consumers. So I think they have better experience. In fact, in New York, for example, the experience with prior approval and review, and then they go with the liberalization. So I think the latest is they go with the liberalization of some of the insurance classes. So I think the other reason that they want liberalization is, I think it was discussed also by other speakers, by June, Benedicto, and also by June, Banson, because right now we have technology that can really fast track the pricing of the product. So that each company with so many variants, they have now the technology really to determine what's the proper price of the particular product. So my other comment on the insurance code, I think right now the insurance code uses the system of file and use and review. I cannot see the prior approval in the insurance code with regard to the product of non-life insurance company. What I know is that the insurance company or PIRA makes and file the rates to the insurance commission. Then after that, the insurance commission will have to review those products using the standard identified by Bob Inco. It should be not discriminatory, it is not unreasonable, it's not excessive. So I think that's necessary if there is what you call a proper approval. But when we go to liberalization, that standard should change, because it's possible that the regulator will not look that standard if there is what you call the liberalization. The other one is, I think, on the role of the PIRA, because I think during the discussion, data is very important for the pricing, and PIRA can get all those information as much as possible. So when I look at the code, I think PIRA can get the information from the members. But since the code does not require that PIRA is the only rating association, there's a possibility that some other companies, you cannot force them to get all the data. But we can change, for example, the insurance code that to mandate probably that data can be also be provided to PIRA. So I think that's my I think the other point is that the other regulator doing the liberalization believes that the regulator should look, there are other protection to the policyholder other than checking the transactional tariff or maintaining the compliance of the tariff. So there are prudential requirements where the resources to the regulator can be given, no? Can be you can zero in on those prudential requirements like capital, solvency, LBC, and all of that. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Attorney Dennis. Well, it's 5 minutes to 12, so I guess you guys, again, are free to send in your comments, your position papers, which we can share. And allow me, in closing, so ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we find ourselves at a crossroads, and we at PIRA are doing what we can to equip you with a balanced information to help you arrive at an informed choice for such an important matter. As I did write somewhere, let us learn vicariously from the experience of other jurisdictions and not have to experience the possible negative effects of a premature decision. Let us unite to work together to come up with a solution that ensures our financial health individually and as an industry, and more importantly, the sustainability of the industry we all belong to. So having said that, maraming salamat po. Thank you for joining us. And we shall send the answers to the questions that are popping up at the moment. So Mr. Chair, would you want to say anything?
Basically, first to thank everyone, the speakers for lending their expertise and their perspectives to the issue at hand, and also to all who attended this forum, particularly the ones who asked questions and share their own opinions and perspectives. Thank you. Indeed, it has been a very engaged and actually exciting discussion. I know that there are still questions. We could not fit everything within a 2-hour session, but within the board, we'll discuss, we'll look at the questions and see if there is a need for a second session, just so that we have have adequate preparation before we get to the referendum. So once again, thank you, and keep safe. Keep safe, everyone.
Before everybody leaves, please can you turn on your cameras for the usual photo op? Sorry for this. Okay, John,
Yes, sir.
go ahead.
Smile, everyone.
Are we okay, John?
First pa lang po, sir.
Oh,
Second.
sorry. Yeah, we have
Second.
several screens. We have over 170 people.
Smile, everyone.
So everybody knows the importance of the topic, so we're all here. So if you're going to call for another one, keep posted. Meanwhile, if we do have any other information, we'll send it to everybody so that they can read up.
Third screen. Smile.
We have 6 screens. Wow. John, hurry.
Fourth screen.
Magpapa-lunch ka, sige ka.
Na po. Fourth screen. Pakawapan na lang po yung mga camera na nasa fourth screen.
Ito pala si Manny. Manny, hello.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you, Tita Ming. Tita Ming, did you want to say anything?
Many, so much, so many
screen.
things. I will reserve it for the next one.
Wow, saving the best for last. Again, everybody, thank you for joining us today, this morning. And
Thank you po.
everybody stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Mitch. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. It's Betty Bye time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Midnight.
allowing me to do
Late.
that.
Very,
Sige,
very late.
sige. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Bob.
Sige ho.
Good night.
Good night din ho. Oh, I mean, good morning.
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 Lunchtime here.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Ben Owandasan. Long time no see. Nakamute ka, nakamute.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sir Mitch.
Mr.
Keep safe,
Betito,
everyone.
good afternoon po.
Tita Ming. Kamusta
Yes.
ka na?
Ito, nakinig lang.
Magsasalita ka sa susunod.
Oo.